Hi, I'm Falco. I'm in charge of customer success at GameAnalytics, and today I want to give you a little bit of a tour through our tool and show to you how it can help you understand your players better. Everything I show you today is available completely free, except for a few features where we'll mention it specifically. When you sign up for GameAnalytics, you will be asked to create or join an organization. Each organization can consist of multiple studios to allow bigger companies more control over which games will be visible to each user within the organization. Each studio can then have one or multiple games nested underneath. To add a new studio or game, simply click the Create button in the top right, and we'll guide you through the process. We are not going through the details of adding a game and how to integrate our SDKs for different engines and platforms today, but you can always find more detailed documentation on our website. This is our main overview page. You will be greeted with all games your user account has access to, with a little bit of top-level information. The depth of the data shown here, especially once you flip over to the portfolio view, might be limited based on your subscription. On the left, you will find shortcuts to this overview, as well as our four main components of Game Analytics, called top to bottom, AnalyticsIQ, SegmentIQ, and MarketIQ. In this case, we want to jump right into AnalyticsIQ for one of the games, so I'll select our example title, Event Forge. Today we'll be looking at the sample data from this imaginary game, so things might look a little bit different for you when you start feeding real data into the system. This is the overview page. It will give you a quick glimpse at some of the most important stats from the previous day, compared to the same weekday of the week before, as well as a 24-hour graph of concurrently active users. Once you have the SDK for the engine or platform of choice integrated and the game set up correctly, basic usage information like this will automatically be tracked and shown here. You can click the integration button on the top of the screen if you want to make sure your events are coming through properly. This page is also a good place to check if you are staying within our event limits, which I will come back to and explain in more details towards the end of this demo. The next view is our real-time section, showing you even more data from the last 24 hours. Most of these will always be populated, while revenue and transactions for in-game purchases require you to have the correct business events set up. This page is another good place to check if your integration is working as intended, as you can see the full contents of events coming in by clicking the Live Events button here at the top. We are going to skip the dashboards for a second here and look at the Explore module first. Trust me, that'll make sense in a little bit. Explore is where you want to go when you're investigating anything specific in your game. It gives you full access to any tracked event and property. At the top, we start with the date range we want to analyze. Let's look at the last 30 days in this case. Now we pick the event we want to look at. We have a bunch of predefined ones for the most common searches, neatly organized by the type of event. For example, when we click on DAU, it will show the daily active users for each day, as well as the total number of unique users during the selected date range. We also have a table down here if you don't care about the graph, and there's a button to export this to a CSV file in case you want to use the data elsewhere. Another example would be looking at ILRD revenue by ad format. If you have any of the supported partner services connected to GA, and you can find a list of them in our documentation, we can now see the total amount of revenue generated by in-game advertisements broken down by where they are shown in the game. You'll also see that we went from a time split to a breakdown by ad format. Of course, you can always adjust this. If we want to see these three as a line graph split over time, we simply click this button here, change this to time, day, and then add the ad format as an additional split. And voila! Now we can see all the revenue from the individual ad formats for each day. Depending on the data you're looking at, this can all become a little bit too much, in which case you can easily highlight or hide individual lines by clicking their name here. If you want to dive even deeper, we have tons of filters you can apply to the data. Want to see only the users from the US that have installed the game in the last week and played on a Samsung phone? No problem. If you have any of our attribution partners connected, again, you can check the list in our documentation, you will even be able to filter by the source and campaign that originally brought the players into your game. As a last example, we want to look at something more unique to your game. Design events allow you to track whatever is most relevant for you in your specific game. We'll start out by selecting design events and aggregating to the mean of value per event user. Beyond the global filters, we have additional filters for each type of event, in this case our custom design events. In this case we care about how much experience players earn on average in the first few stages of the game. So we select only the first world in our first layer, then the first 5 stages within that, and then the level experience gained property. This is not super useful yet, so let's split this by the event ID 02, which was the individual stage. And now we have a graph that neatly shows how much XP is gained by players in the individual stages. Again, we have some freedom in how we show this information, so we can just show this split if we don't care about how this changed on individual days. Last but not least, I want to talk about custom dimensions. On top of the default global filters, you can define 3 custom dimensions, which are things you always want to be able to split the data by. In our example here, this is the character class the player selected when starting the game. By adding this as an additional split for our graph here, we can see that the XP is earned pretty evenly between the classes, with only slight variations. If we had a problem where warriors, for example, wouldn't be able to defeat a certain type of monster in a stage, we would be able to see that in these numbers. Okay, now you might say, Falco, that's very cool if I want to research something specific, but that sounds like a lot of work if I don't always want to configure this every day for data I look at all the time. And you're right. While we do have a button to save any specific view, there is a much more convenient way: our dashboards. Just like for the Explore tool, we already have some defaults for some of the more popular things, like a general overview of your player base. What I think is much cooler, however, is the ability to create custom dashboards for the things you care about. Let's click on Create and make a custom dashboard comparing our character classes. After entering a name for our new dashboard, we click here to add a widget. The interface for the widgets is nearly identical to the Explore module, which is why I wanted to show it to you first. Let's start by adding the experience overview from before. Done. Next, I add the same for the amount of monsters players have defeated in each stage. For that, we can just duplicate the previous widget and just edit this one property. Last but not least, we add a basic overview of how many players of each class we had over the last few days. Now we quickly resize these, move them around to our liking, and the dashboard is done. We can now select if this dashboard is just for us or also our colleagues. The options to make dashboards available across multiple games is limited to our AnalyticsIQ Pro users. Once our dashboard is created, we can always go back to it easily. It's worth mentioning that the date range and global filters are always available, so we can go back and look at the data for a longer period of time, or limit them to only show data from specific countries or builds, for example. Next up is our funnels feature. Often you will have some kind of process or progression in your game that the players will go through, and you want to see how many players get stuck or lost along the way. The most common example would be a simple progression between levels and stages, like shown here, representing the first 10 stages of the first world in our game. Here you can see how many players that start each individual stage make it through. You can choose to look at it in either percentages or the total number of players, which can be narrowed down further with a date range and global filters, just like we've seen in our dashboards. The system will automatically highlight the step with the biggest drop-off, in this case getting from step 5 to step 6. Of course, it will be up to you to make the right decisions based on this data. Maybe the stage is more difficult than you intended and needs to be adjusted, but maybe you introduce a core game mechanic that you already know not all players will like. Funnels don't have to be purely for level progression though, and can be set up freely using your own design events. Other examples will be analyzing how players navigate an in-game shop, or if they end up interacting with all of the optional features within your game. Next up are our engagement and cohorts views. This way you can more easily see how players who installed the game on a certain day behave in the first few days of playing the game, and you have a variety of predefined metrics to look at. Retention gets its own view here, where you can see how likely players are to return to your game, and of course you can use filters to get more specific when looking at groups of players. This data goes back up to 80 days, and you can individually pick the 9 days you want to compare. In our example here, the first couple of days and then one after each completed week. Next is one of our newer features, distributions. This tool allows you to get an overview of your player base that covers a bit more than simply looking at averages. Like in this example of playtimes, you will see both what applies to most of your player base, but also get an insight into outliers. There are a number of predefined metrics for you to look at, and you can include or exclude players based on a range of additional parameters as well. The health page provides more information about any errors your players are encountering. It shows how often errors or warnings are triggered and how many players were affected by them. Of course, you can also use our global filters to dive deeper into affected devices, builds, and so on. Finally, you can easily copy error messages with a single click in case you want to forward them to other team members or lock them in a separate bug tracking tool. With an AnalyticsIQ Pro subscription, this page also offers additional data about the game's performance. If your game contains microtransactions, the monetization page is a good place to get an overview. This dashboard conveniently delivers the most important pieces of information when it comes to purchases your players make. Thanks to our partnership with Xsolla, You will also see any revenue generated through their web stores, so you can compare between those and regular App Store purchases, as well as a handy calculator on how your revenue would change depending on how many of your buyers are using the web shop. Next up is SegmentIQ, where you find options to analyze or interact with specific segments of your player base. Let's start with remote configs. These allow you to upload instructions for your game straight from the GameAnalytics interface. This allows you to set up what we call a key within your game and attach certain behavior to it. You can then update this key from within GameAnalytics, so you don't need to update the game for your players or rely on a separate live ops or backend solution. This can be simple things like turning a Halloween event on or off, but it can be used for more specific instructions, like adjusting the color of interface elements with a hexadecimal value. We recently updated this feature to support relatively large JSON configuration files, giving you even more flexibility. You can also apply filters, so the change only affects players from certain countries or those playing a specific build of the game. The functionality is deceptively simple, but since you have total freedom of what effect the configs have in-game, it can be a very powerful tool. SegmentIQ is also where you find our A/B testing feature. You will want to make changes to your game based on the data you've seen during your analysis. However, often the conclusion is not completely clear and relies on your interpretation of the data. That is why you want to roll out changes to a smaller number of players first to prove your theory. Let's say very few people use a quick play feature that immediately starts a multiplayer match with other players. Your theory is that the red button just gets lost in the busy main interface, and you want to try if another color would lead more people clicking it. So within your game's code, you implement 4 different colored buttons and define that the version shown to a player is based on the QP button color variable. In GameAnalytics, we set up a test using this variable as the key. We then say that of the next 5,000 players who install the game, a quarter will see the original red button, our control group, while the others will see a gold, green, or blue button instead. Once this is set up, new users will automatically be put into these test groups, and we can look at a report to check if the behavior of one of the groups is different from the others. Most importantly, this test now becomes a global filter in all other places we have explored so far. That way you can use it in the Explore tool or even in your dashboards. Just like the remote configs, this is a very flexible feature and can be used to test anything from button colors to item prices to a completely different tutorial. Check our documentation for more information and some best practices. By the way, you can find the documentation by clicking on the little question mark in the top right corner here. This is also where you can get in touch with our support team if you have any questions or run into any problems. The last feature here is user analysis, but this is limited to users with a SegmentIQ Pro upgrade. We will talk more about it in a separate video, but it offers a more in-depth interface that allows for more filtering and visualization options, and most importantly, highly customizable user segmentation with access to user and event level data. The next section is PipelineIQ, which we will also cover in a separate video, as it is currently only available with a separate PipelineIQ Pro subscription. This section is aimed at advanced users that want access to the raw event data in an SQL table or a real-time export of the JSON events into their own storage for more custom implementations and data processing pipelines. If this feature is interesting to you, you can always reach out to us to discuss it in more detail. Last but not least, there is MarketIQ, which is where we offer developers to look out beyond their own data to see how they compare in the market. Here you can get a quick overview of the iOS and Android app stores and see what games are currently leading the charts or are trending right now. This is also where you can find benchmarks, a previously paid for feature now available to every GameAnalytics user. If you are exploring new genres and you would like to know what metrics you should shoot for to be among the top percentiles for those games, you can find out what day 1 retention, playtime, conversion rate, or other KPIs would put you up there in comparison to other games on the GameAnalytics platform. For companies that would also like to explore the marketing campaigns of other mobile developers, we now offer Ad Insights as part of the new MarketIQ Pro subscription, which is a sophisticated tool that offers deep insights into millions of ad creatives for hundreds of thousands of apps. Before we finish up, I want to talk about the general limitations when it comes to sending data. First and most important, there is no limit to how many players you can track with GameAnalytics. Even in the free version, you may track tens of millions of active players. We do enforce a few different things though. At the time of recording, every game is limited to 500 events per daily active user per day. It is not important which player sends the event though, so if you have one player that only sends 10 events, another can send 990. This is mostly to encourage an efficient event design and discourage things like sending heartbeat events every few seconds, or for example sending an event for every shot fired, instead of sending one event with a total amount at the end of the level. Similar rules apply to cardinality, which represents unique combinations of events. Let's say you have an event triggered every time the player defeats an enemy. This event tracks the enemy type, the weapon used to defeat it, and what upgrade level said weapon is. In a game with 20 enemies, 12 weapons, and 3 upgrade levels, this leads to 720 possible combinations, which is not too much of a problem. In an RPG with 80 enemies, 20 weapons that can have 100 different levels though, we would have 160,000 different combinations, which is far too many, and we require tracking these differently. For example, by grouping some of these together, like weapons level 1 through 25, 26 to 50, and so on. The cardinality limit within GA is 15,000 for design events, 8,000 for progression events, and 4,000 for resource events. Staying within these event and cardinality limits is important to keep the experience responsive and snappy for all of our users. If your project has some unique circumstances that require an increase for the amount of events, please reach out to us so we can discuss custom limits for your games. And this is it for today. But keep an eye on our YouTube channel for more information regarding the GameAnalytics tool, interesting case studies, and webinars about best practices. Thanks for watching.